I rise today to simply say to Chairman Grassley and the Judiciary Committee, thank you for being willing to this week have a markup, meaning to legislate, report out a bill with regard to the prescription drug and heroin epidemic that we now face around our country. The legislation is called the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, or CARA. It focuses on several areas. One is prevention and education to try to keep people from making the wrong decision and going down the road to addiction. But another is to encourage states and provide incentives to local governments and nonprofits to use evidence-based treatment and recovery that has been proven to work to try to deal with this epidemic. Today we have, unfortunately, higher levels of death from overdoses, drug overdoses, than we do any other accidental cause of death, more than car accidents, for instance. In my own home state of Ohio, this has been true for the last couple of years. We lost over 2,400 Ohioans last year to drug overdoses. Part of our legislation also addresses this issue very directly by providing our law enforcement and other first responders, firefighters, EMS, with Narcan, which is a drug, really a miracle drug to bring people back if they have had an overdose, also known as naloxone. And finally, the legislation helps to get prescription drugs out of the hands of the wrong people. There's been overprescribing over the years, so our legislation encourages getting these drugs off the shelves, the bathroom shelves, so they can't be used, and to have a drug monitoring program so you can tell when someone's been prescribed these drugs. And it would be national in scope so that someone can't get prescription drugs in one location and then go across a state line to get it somewhere else. Sadly, these narcotic painkillers have caused a lot of the concern out there, because what they do is they are sometimes given appropriately, maybe for pain, but they're overprescribed, and then someone uses them to the point that they become addicted, and then later turn to heroin because heroin is so much less expensive. This is an issue, again, that addresses, that affects the whole country. In my own state, it looks like the per capita use in our rural area is higher than it is anywhere else, including in the inner city or in our suburban areas. But no zip code is immune from this. We're all affected by it. In Ohio, over the last week, there have been 2 incidences where people have overdosed while behind the wheel. In one, just a couple of days ago, someone overdosed on heroin while his kids were in the back seat, had a bad crash. Luckily, the children were not injured badly. But this continues to happen again and again, and of course, much crime is being committed to pay for the habit. So this is an effort on our behalf at the federal government level to work better with the state governments, with local governments, and with nonprofits to address this growing problem and epidemic of prescription drug and heroin abuse. And again, I encourage the Judiciary Committee to move swiftly with this legislation. On Thursday, there is a markup scheduled so that we can move this legislation to the floor of the Senate, get it through the House, and get it to the President for his signature. There seems to be not just a bipartisan, but a nonpartisan support for this legislation. In other words, it's not a political issue. This is something that affects us as fathers and mothers and brothers and sons. And I hope that this United States Senate will take on this issue. I was in Ohio yesterday meeting with some women who are recovering addicts, and they told me their stories, many of whom, again, had started on prescription drugs, sometimes because of an accident. And they talked to me about how the grip of addiction is so great that it requires real courage and real resilience to be able to come through it. We want these women and others to be able to live out their God-given abilities and not to be afflicted by this addiction, which is really a disease. And this legislation that we have before us, I believe, is a first step in that direction. I encourage my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support it, to move it to the President so that we can begin to help local communities, neighborhoods, help our states be able to address this growing problem. I yield back my time, Mr. President.